My money too. Looks like the cameras need to be set up. Just a second. Sorry. Okay.
Welcome everybody to the Pleasant View Planning Commission meeting for February 1st, 2024. It is now 6 p.m. so we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with a pledge of allegiance and an open prayer reading or expression of thought by Commissioner Wolf. You rise and join in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity to be together tonight to discuss some of the needs of the city, and we pray that thy Spirit will be here, that we may be inspired and make sound decisions and recommendations. We're grateful for all the opportunities that we have living here, for the beauty that surrounds us. We're grateful for the rain and snow that we've received, and pray that that may continue throughout this winter. And we just express our gratitude at this time in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. We have an agenda set before us. All commissioners have had a chance to read it. Is there anyone that needs to declare any conflicts of interest for this evening? Hearing of none, we'll go ahead and go to the legislative items. We have first the discussion and possible action and recommendation to the city council for an ordinance amendment to modify the setback for agricultural buildings in the RE20. We'll go ahead and ask the Brandon Patel, our administrator, to go ahead and do the presentation.
So this, there's been some interest expressed in potentially making a modification to the setback requirements for accessory buildings under certain conditions in the RE20 zone. Particularly, there are some lots on, I think it's either 600 or 1,000 West. I don't have it.
1,000 West.
That they're really deep, narrow lots. They're maybe, I don't know, 500 feet deep or 400 feet deep, something like that. And so we just pulled together some draft language, but wanted to give your input and thoughts on potential adjustments to that standard. Right now, the requirement for accessory buildings is that they need to be 25 feet from a side property line. And so what we sort of workshopped is the concept of at 50 feet behind an existing dwelling on a lot or greater, that the accessory buildings the setback could be reduced to 15 feet. That's just a proposal. And or 200 feet from the front property line would be another standard. And then trying to think about addressing contingencies. One of the comments that I made as we were discussing this among staff is that typically it's not good to set a standard for something that's going on someone else's property, so from 50 feet from a neighboring home. So we tried to keep this to just from measuring from the property lines. But we think that this may help accomplish that same purpose. But then we don't currently have a definition of rear property line that I'm aware of. And so I've just written this to accomplish the same objective. This last sentence or clause that says that the 25-foot setback would remain in effect for any property line that's less than 45 degrees tangent from the average angle of the front property line. So if the front property line looks like this, if it's less than 45 degrees from that, if that angle is 45 degrees or less, then it could, that effect would still be, the 25 feet would still be in effect. And the point of that would be just to, if it's functioning like a rear property line, then it needs to be set back from a rear property line. So this was just a first stab at it. Wanted to raise the issue and get your thoughts and input on it. So any thoughts or questions?
Just for clarification, on the agenda, it's an amendment to modify the setbacks for agricultural buildings.
Okay,
So we're talking agricultural there, but then when I read what we've written, it's a setback for an accessory building. So are we talking about agricultural buildings?
Both.
Which can also
Both,
be
yeah.
accessory, but there is a little bit of a,
Can you want to piggyback with that, because when Charlotte said it too, was agriculture, give us a definition, is that just a small stable, is that a big barn, is that, or do we have?
The definition in the zoning, I believe it includes animals. So it's the animals that are allowed in that residential zone. So that's what distinguishes from just a regular accessory and actually housing animals.
so my question really was, is this pertaining just to agricultural and animals in the barn? Or is it pertaining to any accessory building? Because down the line, we're having a discussion on accessory apartments later on. So basically, this could also pertain to it being a detached accessory apartment,
No.
the way it's written.
No, this is just for the agricultural
Okay.
uses and the language this evening and Brandon didn't really get into this, but we're recommending tabling because we wanted to vet it further. There was just a council member desire to clarify better in the code, just with some confusion that had come forward to them. And so, I mean, we think that there's value in further clarifying.
So in Brandon's wording, then it should be the setback for agricultural buildings. Right?
Yeah, that was the original proposal or to discuss.
And I know we're headed down the road for table, we might want to table and ask for more details. So as a group, I would suggest that we look at what are some things we'd like staff looking into the way back. Myself, I'd like to drive past 1,000. But one issue that I always have a problem with is if we're looking at, you mentioned on a certain road or a certain area, and it might fit and look really nice there. But in this, we're looking at all of our inventory, so that opens it up. We've had sport places for certain reasons, we open it up to all our inventories. Maybe these people on 600 and big giant backyards and big wide areas, not like certain things. But you look at it a little bit further than our employment, and now that allows everybody to start looking at it. So we need to look at what are the agricultural units also being very important. And so I personally I would have to think about a reservation when we drop it 50 to 25, because that tells us, people are going to start doing things in other parts and other subdivisions that are a lot kind of closer together. So I mean, that's one thing I'd like to look at is what the definitions are. Other thoughts and comments? It's open discussion.
Yeah, I would like to follow a lot closer to the building code rather than just creating our own rules. Your building code allows you to build within 1 foot of the property line, so your water doesn't shed on your neighbors. You have to be so far behind your dwelling in this part of the building code. I don't know if it could be that per neighborhood.
But the biggest reason we do make sure that if people come in and then now all of a sudden you build in a certain area, knowing that
Your CCNRs can be paid for your certain areas.
may not be the one to do that. Sometimes they're right. So it puts agriculture like.
I would like to have you recommend something about the on standard building code. We have hundreds and hundreds of outbuildings that are already built within the property. Mainly agricultural, right? They meant that they call it improvements for issue. They meet the aesthetics of the neighborhood, and so whether you're putting in a steel building, or you're putting in a garage, or you're putting in an agricultural, building, as long as you're meeting building code, I don't understand why we can write separate ordinances per community.
And I think the question being, and this is absolutely, you know, at the city's discretion, whether or not they want to make this determination, but whether or not buildings that house agricultural animals have impacts on neighboring properties more so than just regular accessory buildings. And I think that's kind of the question at hand. And so I think that's probably why they have separate rules right now. And so the proposal would be to modify that a little bit to allow for more close location, but the question being where or how, or, you know.
Other thoughts?
Just that where seems to be different, they all have their own, and I understand what Dean's saying with the 1 foot setback, but sometimes we have public utility easements that require a setback from those. I mean, there's also. Yeah, you're right. So there are a lot of. But I've seen it.
Yeah, thoughts?
I guess I was trying to figure out what's the genesis of the concern or the change, where is this coming from?
So again, we had sorry, Brennan, a council member who had neighbors expressing concerns with the distance requirements.
Specific to that area on 1,000?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that area is kind of tricky because the lots are quite large and very long. And so, you know, the question being, if it was down at the end of the lot, if you nowhere near the neighbor's dwelling, would it really matter where that's located in proximity to the fence line?
So a couple points in response to Commissioner Stokes' comments. This would actually be a reduction of the requirements that are currently in place. Currently, they're 25 feet from any side property line. So this would be more accommodating to property owners. The second point would be that the ordinance has written the intent, and I don't know that I've got the numbers right with the 200 feet. That was just my first guess, is that there are relatively few long, deep, narrow RE20 lots that are 400 to 500. I mean, I haven't looked exhaustively, but from what I could see as I looked at the overview of the RE20 zone, there was maybe 8 to 10, maybe there's 20, I don't know. But so the point is if your lot is shaped, you know, in a long skinny rectangle, like the shape of the nameplates, then in that, you know, back 2/3 approximately of the lot, you can get closer to the property line. And again, that's a reduction. The second is whenever you're dealing with outbuildings, accessory buildings, agricultural buildings, the trick, I mean, from a building code tends to address life safety, core life safety issues. Purpose of zoning code deals more with balancing impacts to neighbors, not just aesthetics, but, you know, they're like, I've seen, you know, 25 feet accessory buildings that are 1 or 2 feet from the property line and neighboring and there were the architectural metal and like the neighboring property owners had to install extra air conditioners in their house because of all the heat that was coming off of the accessory building. So the goal is to balance and mediate multiple property owners at the same time, the rights of multiple property owners because of what's happening on someone's property, whether, you know, it does have an impact on others. And so it's trying to figure out how do we look out for the rights of both property owners at the same time so that, you know, someone can do something reasonable on their property that doesn't harm someone else reasonably. So those are just a few thoughts, but.
Well, from somebody who has horses and has much more than 25, 50 feet to their homes, we get complaints about the smell of the horses, the increased flies, horses staying at night, getting frightened, around one time a mountain lion had come down, I would be frightened too. But we have had a number of complaints, and we're on 3 acres. And we still have complaints.
Sharon. Dave, did I hear you? Just in agreement with you, and there are a lot of other lots this might apply to all around Melbourne View there. A number of long skinny lots as well might cause some friction.
Right, and in looking at the zoning map, I mean, most of the city is zoned RE20, and so that's a real consideration.
Jeff, thoughts?
Nothing that hasn't already been shared.
Since it sounds like this might be better for a table, but let's go ahead and follow Brandon's recommendation. Let's open for a public hearing. Because it will be recorded as a potential public hearing agenda item. Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll move, we open a public hearing for item number 2A on the agenda.
Jeff has made a motion. We have a second. I'll second. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. On the public hearing, is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on the discussion item 2A? Anyone would like to hear any comments? We'll close the public hearing. Motion to close the public hearing. We have a second. Second, Chad, all in favor, say aye. Aye. So we can, I don't know, we haven't anything to actually recommend to the city council this time, so it sounds to me like open the table, but is there any further questions or thoughts that you'd like staff to kind of dig into or review as they're creating this, come back to the future? So I'd like to make a motion.
A motion that I'm against the 15-foot or 25-foot off the country.
I think that would come when we have an actual action.
So we motion to table for
But you can share your opinion on that. Yeah, you just-
Yeah, but that's not even part of the motion. Right. It's not part of the motion.
So we're tabling it for tonight to revisit it. Okay, then I motion that we table this item 2A on the agenda.
We've made a motion to table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. We'll go ahead and now move to item 2B, which is a legislative item, also discussion of possible action of a recommendation to the city council for subdivision zone ordinance amendments to modify the term concept plans and 3 application plans. We'll have to have our city administrator remove.
Well, this is actually pretty basic and to the point. So you all likely recall the process we went through to modify our subdivision ordinances, and thank you for the heavy lift on that. It is February 1st, and we were in compliance with state requirements prior to the deadline. So thank you, and thank you to our, obviously, mayor and council for the efforts on that as well. So with that, in looking at the state code further, we notice some terminology differences with what we've included in our code. So the concept plans is really the application that comes before the formal application that's reviewed. And that's the option, or in some cases when it's not relative to the housing requirements, a requirement for an individual to bring forward just in concept what they're looking to do in the city. And then we give them further direction on, this would require a rezone, this likely would need a general plan amendment, whatever the next steps are for their process. And so it's not a formal application. We don't have all of the materials submitted with that, but just more of a conceptual discussion. However, in looking at the state code, they reference the term pre-application and we reference concept plan. And the challenge with that is the state has started a timer when an application is received. And although a concept plan isn't necessarily an application, I guess it could be considered to be an application. And we just want to make it abundantly clear and follow suit with the state code and the language herein to be able to reference that. So I don't know if there's any questions with that. Really, it would be a recommendation to the city council with an ordinance changing all of the references of concept plan to the pre-application plans, again, for that clarification, and so that it's clear if the developer's looking at state code and what is required under subdivision and looking at our code, oh, this is where I'm at in that step in that process.
Just clarification. We're changing it to pre-application, prevent the time clock from starting in.
That's how the state code
That's
reads.
how they get away with it.
Right, and really, I mean, they're not starting the time, because we don't have a full application for review. It's just
That makes it clear that
Yeah.
it's not an application.
correct.
Any discussion on the staff presentation and the budget for staff? Seems very clear and straightforward, and it's appreciated. The simple.
That's why there's no packets today, but I have materials, don't worry.
We appreciate the simplicity of this.
Yeah, that's very nice. And I like the fact that we're following in line with what's going on with the state. I think that's fantastic. So if anybody else has any feedback, we can motion to open the public hearing.
Or questions, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Any other questions you have?
Motion for public hearing.
I motion to open for public hearing.
This motion to open, we have a second.
Second.
Second, Sean, all in favor, say aye. We're now in a public hearing, we'll open up for any public comment on this discussion. Seeing none tonight, we'll go ahead and ask for a closing public hearing.
Motion that we close the public hearing.
Jeff, make a motion to close. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Jeff, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Unanimous with close public hearing. Someone like to make a recommendation, or is there any discussion to move forward?
I would like to make a recommendation that we recommend the city council to modify the general concept plans to pre-application plans in the subdivisions and the ordinance amendment.
We have a motion on the table, and we have a second.
I'll second that one.
Second by Dean. Any discussion on the topic? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll go ahead and move to the next one. Thank you very much for that one. Number 3, we have an introductory discussion for moderate income housing requirements. A presentation discussion city efforts to address moderate income housing needs in Pleasanton in accordance with the standards outlined in Utah Code and preliminary discussion regarding the allowance of detached accessory apartments. Go ahead and have staff lead us in the discussion.
I don't mind passing down the road. You what?
This one's coal miner D.
Do you need more copies? Wasn't sure how many. And the reason why our mayor is joining us this evening is, this is a process that's rather intensive and something that
I thought it was your private too.
We're not here.
or not to be. Oh, that was good. This is something that is become a real work through for us. I couldn't get my flash drive to work, so I'm just gonna pop this up on, let's see, on the screen. I think it'll work. Oh, nice. Okay. So I know it's been a minute since we've discussed moderate income housing and the state requirements, and I thought a really good preface to the discussion on the detached accessory units would be to go through the requirements of the state code and what cities are being asked to do their part to assist with the affordable housing crisis. And so just wanted to give some pretext to that. I don't think we'll have a very detailed and deep discussion tonight, but I do want to have some preliminary discussions on this topic as it's important. This is an important part of our progression toward meeting the state requirements and goals that we've set. And I'll go into depth on the goals we've set and the whys behind those. So just to start off, and I like this graphic, affordable housing, what does that mean? And the mayor's always saying, what does that mean? Is that too high quality for what we're I don't know. It's really become an interesting concept and a really difficult thing to tackle. And I think everyone is trying to figure out how do we overcome this crisis when there's so many market factors that are driving what's happening here? And the cities have been tasked to help through some pretty extensive measures, but there's only so much that the cities can do as well with that. So with regard to the city code, because of our population, we are required to adopt the Moderate Income Housing Implementation Plan and participate in efforts to assist in enhancing housing offerings. We are required to select at least 3 strategies that are identified by the state to implement over a 5-year period of time. We do not get to just pick whatever strategies we want. There's a pretty substantial list for the state gives us to pick from. We can pick more than 3 strategies, but 3 is the minimum, and that's what we've picked at this time. And part of the reason for picking the 3, it's not that we're not willing to do more, but there's a lot of challenge, and I'll kind of go through that a little bit with the compliance components and with the just basically reporting and ensuring that we're continuing the progress. We have 5 years to implement these standards, and if we don't implement these standards to a level acceptable to the state, we have the ability to lose our BMC road funds, which are critical to our roads. So with that, the requirements, we did an initial report first, and that some of you may have been involved in that process, but in our general plan, we had to identify our strategies, and those strategies have recently changed as the state law has continued to change over time. And so I think it was last year, adopted modifications to that because, again, the rules and standards and timelines have been shifting over time. So we did submit the initial report. It was accepted last year, and then this year, well, I guess it's February, so I'm thinking fiscal years, but in the last couple of years, we submitted our initial report, and then we've submitted since, which is this is the requirements for the annual subsequent reports. And you'll notice there's a lot more to the requirements, and some of these are rather intensive as well. One of the requirements that's included in this is actually tracking data relative to the number of AAAs as we now have, or accessory dwelling units that are available and being utilized. The real challenge with that is, I mean, we have, I think, 3 licensed in the city, but I'm guessing we probably have more than 3 in the city. So the state sees that number and they think, oh, they may not be doing their part because they have 3, but in reality, that's not really a fair representation, but that's neither here nor there. So there are several requirements to submit in this report every single year on an annual basis, and we have to show meaningful progress in each of the categories and the goals that we've set. So the strategies that we've adopted as a city, the first being to rezone for densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing. And you can follow along on this in your report. This is the report we submitted last year, and I was really pleased because we did get compliance on the first version, and 40% of cities did not. So I feel pretty good about that. Not good for the other cities, but good that we were able to be successful in our completion of that. And so this talks a lot about the application of the mixed use West Zone. And so you may recall the process we went through to establish that zoning option. And it's a mixed use zoning option that would be to the west of Highway 89 and to allow for commercial and housing mix, with commercial required to come in as the first component of the development. And so we have not yet, we've created the zone, but we have not yet applied the zone to an area. And so that's one of our measures or benchmarks that's been established. And again, I mean, it's kind of this really tricky process because we've got to be very thoughtful in how are we implementing this to make sure we make meaningful progress over a 5-year period and continue the execution of this while also taking into account the various different things that change and are modified, and taking into account the role of our planning commission and the role of our city council. And that's one of the things we've talked a lot with the state about is we don't want these goals to prefix us and pigeonhole our officials. That's really not a fair thing to do. But a lot of the goals really do push for some type of implementation in form. So our second strategy focuses on a demonstrated investment in the rehabilitation or expansion of infrastructure that facilitates the construction of moderate income housing. And the application of this that we've utilized, and you all probably remember, is the new road that's going in next to the trailer park community behind the Jimmy John's. And because that is long-standing infrastructure, it's creating a safe path for those residents that does qualify. So that's our second strategy, and it does create a longer existing, I mean, when you're putting a public road next to housing infrastructure, a longer existing commitment to that area and what's available there. So that's our second strategy, and obviously completion of a new road is not a simple process. My guess is we'll get to stretch that over the 5 years as is intended and continue to make the progress there. But I think that'll really serve those residents well with access to safe signalized intersections and some of the services in that area. So the third strategy is the one that we're here to talk a little bit about this evening. And it's to create or allow for, and this language you'll see, citations to state code. You have to include word for word and a citation to the state code in your plan, or you can get dinged. That's just part of the requirement. It's really, really cumbersome, but I understand they're just trying to ensure compliance. So to create or allow for and reduce regulations related to internal or detached, accessory dwelling units in residential zones. And the focus being to review what our regulations are and to look at reductions to what is in place to make it easier for people to be able to utilize this as an affordable housing option. And so that's where the discussion comes into play, because we've got to look at, if we have detached units, what do those look like? What areas of the city do we want to look at having those? And it is a big shift from what we've done. There have been indications that the state is looking at requiring the allowance of detached units. And so this goal fits with some of what the state strategies and emphasis are. And so we felt that this goal met well with what we see coming to the state soon and the requirements that we'll be looking to comply to in the near future. And then we can be proactive in establishing what we feel best suits our community.
Real quick question before we read that.
Yeah.
So we already submitted this as one of our 3 items.
Correct.
So now it will be up to us, because we don't have it yet.
Right.
We don't allow it. So now we're, I won't say forced to, but now we, in this 5-year window, we need to now define what is the detached going to be for us, where do we allow it, how do we, what are the ordinances that we're going to need to actually accept this into the system? Does the state dictate much of that, or are we allowed to create those definitions?
They don't currently dictate that. I anticipate there will be some requirements to require it, but I don't know if it'll dictate some of the specifics as to how it applies to our community. But I think if it is required to allow for the detached, it would, again, behoove us to be proactive in looking at what we see fit. And again, we have to implement 3 strategies. And so, I mean, this one seemed like it fit our community well. I don't know if I answered your question. I might not have, sorry.
No, I just, but we haven't, so now it's up to us to create the definitions of how we would like to propose to city council.
Correct.
This would be adopted.
Correct.
The state says that we don't have the right to deny an ADU, whether it's internal or external, correct?
Correct. So they've made shifts with internal. So external, currently, we can deny. But we anticipate that will change, but we don't, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. It didn't, but there's been a lot of discussion, but the attached ones did happen.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of controversy, and you may have recalled in one of our planning commission meetings, because there was an ADU proposed in an HOA, and the HOA was furious. And the state actually said, these are allowed in HOAs. And so we tried to explain that this isn't us. I mean, the state made this shift. And again, I think the state has good intentions, but I mean, these efforts are being funneled through the cities and we're trying to manage expectations. And that's why I think this conversation is so helpful, because I didn't want to come here and say, we are all, and not that we're not all for detached accessory dwelling units. I don't know where we're at on it, but I didn't want to come with the auspice that the city's pushing this just on our own, but rather we're doing this in order to meet the standards of the state and in order to do our part with the housing requirements.
I think most here, when we help agree to those three as being our recommendation
Mhm.
moving forward with it. I mean, I think myself from that's why I guess let's make sure that we're saying where can we go, let's put the regulations in, and then the next thing we have to do is just hope that people actually follow it and actually come and apply for an application.
Right.
Detached or application for, being someone myself, I have probably 2 detached and 2 accessory, AAAs within half a mile of my house that I know are not in the applications for. So I think what we set here would dictate a little bit forward looking. So what are the next steps then for us? This is a good jumping off point. And
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody was
Makes
kind of
good.
clear where we're at. And
questions to staff on what's been proposed. Things that you'd like to see as we go down the road of developing this.
so I have a couple of things on this, I guess. Just, this is a very, very general definition. I was in meetings pretty much the entirety of today, so this PowerPoint is a little rough. I apologize. But just, these are some characteristics of a detached unit. So usually they have their own kitchen, living area, separate entrance. They might be, again, attached to a house or garage as the ones are built standalone. But then, utilize water and energy connections. And this definition says of the primary house, but that really is a matter of discussion and, something we need to work through with our public works and really consider our adequate public facilities. I mean, there's a lot of different components to take into account here. So based on discussion, these are some of the things that I thought might be helpful, and we don't have to go through all of these in depth tonight, but just things to be thinking about. We can go into some initial discussion on some of these. If there's really strong preferences that you have that you want to take into consideration. I know Sherry Neff mentioned, well, maybe we prescribe which areas of the city that we want to focus these in. And so I would like to gather just some preliminary thoughts, ideas that, again, these are just broad discussion areas or points that maybe we could discuss tonight. But this meeting and this discussion ultimately helps us toward our compliance, but also helps us toward meeting our goal. And so that's the purpose of this discussion. And it was a light evening. So sorry, Brandon, I took advantage of the meeting to have this discussion. And again, I felt it helpful to have the mayor here because he's been in many of the discussions with the state, with the Utah League of Cities and Towns as we've navigated this process. It's not an easy thing. I think all of the cities are struggling. There's questions how much impact we can have, but I think at the end of the day, we have the requirements that we have and for a reason to try our best to do our part and help. So.
One thing I'm gonna jump in real quick, to just open my eyes. When I'm thinking of it, I think in the past we've all thought about it as a detached, well, it's a garage, and someone's living on the top of the garage. You just totally opened my eyes to these tiny homes. And I think somewhere now we're going to see shied away from those type of things. But after what Nate just said, right? On the agriculture, I'm going to recap in just a minute. You're going to say it should be 1 foot away from the fence line and fence line, but with houses, on our houses, we have specific things to keep things from setbacks from the front and on the side. So you don't have, living neighbors right up against it. So those would be, I think, big topics. I mean, even among us is, when I see that single, we'll call it tiny home, you could have that stuck right in the corner of your lot, but then there again is that pair of neighbors. I think I'd rather have that than more.
Okay, Julie.
And that's an interesting thing you bring up, because I don't believe, and I can double check, and Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, and I can again double check, but I don't believe our code really defines tiny homes. I mean, you know, there's lot requirements, there's I mean, there's various components, but I mean, you could argue if we don't have a clear definition of tiny homes, that any ADU is a tiny home. And so that's something to take into consideration. I know I've seen in other communities where they require the main dwelling to have similar architectural styles and materials to the accessory dwelling, different components there. I think one of the things, and I didn't include on the list again, because I was a little short on time, but you know, working with the fire marshal as well, and making sure that these are safe, that there's safe egress, if there's an incident, that they have access with a fire engine to be able to basically help save life and property. So there, I mean, there's lots of different components here.
Mayor, we have you here tonight. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback.
I just wanna.
Is the mic
make
on?
Sure that we're going through this process.
Make sure you're on.
As we're going through this process, we make it clear the delineation between the tax, accessory building versus a dwelling. The problem that's happening now in the city is people are building accessory buildings with basically living areas. So, oh no, I'm just gonna use that as an office, but they're, you get a full kitchen in your office, you know? So, and they're a foot away from the property. So we're trying to get ahead of this, because this is being, Amy's really nice, but it's coming. The legislature is going to do it. It's just a matter of this year or next year or whatever. So we want to make sure we get a clear delineation so that we can kind of make sure that the dwellings aren't right on the property. There's better setbacks. So we just need to keep clear, because we're always getting confused as we're talking, as we go through our ordinances and stuff. People say, well, why would we want to do that? You know, it's kind of like the agricultural versus regular. You know, one's got animal, same thing. It's got a person, probably should be right on the property. So we're talking dwellings here, not just accessory.
Building.
Good definition. Thank you for that clarification.
Mayor, can you address to just the things that we were talking about to single family occupied, not like an apartment, where those are kind of the
Well,
languages that we're looking at
Yes.
to,
Stuff.
we don't want people living there, single family, no flat lots, things like that.
Main structure has to be occupied, things like that. We can make sure that we include in this, so that it's not, you know, they're building three things and they're having rent out bedrooms, that kind of stuff. We don't want to. Yeah, so all that kind of stuff's gotta be considered, and treated as a dwelling with the right setbacks. You know, this is gonna have lots of impacts on the city. You know, our ERUs were calculated on third and half acre lots, and then all of a sudden we're starting to double up on these and the trouble and water and sewer and everything. So,
The footprint of the building.
but it is being, it's being forced on us, and we got ahead of the game by approving them in one of our things, because we kind of knew where it was headed. So, hey, if we're gonna have to do this, we might as well make that our goal.
Well, thank you.
So then putting in regulations, you have wording to prevent like nightly or weekly rentals, right?
And that's something we can take into consideration and add into it. I think that makes perfect sense. I will say from an enforceability standpoint, it's very challenging, but that isn't to say that we shouldn't have it in there and have the standards clear. And that's one of the things, and it's not on this slide, but I think public process is going to be very important to this. I guess community engagement is listed, but you know, really bringing the public in and helping them understand, so that if they have these units, I mean, to the mayor's point, that the setbacks are being done properly. The last thing we want is somebody crammed in the top of somebody's shed that they put some loft in before, and then there's not safety measures in place. There's not adequate windows. There's not, I mean, that's absolutely terrifying.
I just, if the goal is to help moderate income, and pretty much people in the top, really, the weekly rentals, nightly rentals, that's helping people financially, but not necessarily helping those in moderate income households.
Right.
So, I think that we need to make conditions in place.
Seems reasonable.
Just a comment, in prior discussions of accessory dwellings, seems like the parking became an issue. Whether you require a wider driveway or maybe a separate parking pad, we need to kind of look at that. I believe that is all in AAA, is it does require a separate parking.
Off-street parking stall right now.
But it's not allowed currently, I believe.
The internal units are,
They do an
But-
application. Our problem is most of them don't have applications.
we have 3 applications.
Three, how many does it have?
I know. Yeah, and when the state's like, we want this data, I'm like, well, that's gonna make all the cities look bad, and it's not even true, but.
It'd be helpful to have some regulations regarding that. though.
Oh, absolutely.
That'd be great. Jeff, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean. It's coming. I mean, what about the sidewalk? You know, I know for Catch, they have to have a sidewalk. So would you still have to have a sidewalk going back to the? I guess it's one of the thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and that, I mean, this is how this discussion is honestly valuable to us, because I mean, it's kind of a brainstorm, and so these are the types of things we can look at incorporating into an ordinance. So I think that that's a great point, especially, I mean, you don't want somebody not being able to easily access them. Yeah, yeah.
Any comments? Tom?
I think I like the 3 strategies. I think that's a good direction, and from your point, I think it's good for us to get out ahead of this. If we see it coming, let's get our regulations in place.
Thank you.
For one thing, if we get it in place, and then people who are doing it illegally anyway now, we gather them in so that they are legal. It actually shows that we are doing our part, and which is being done anyway. So we want to make sure that there is a way that we can enforce the regulations and bring people into compliance.
And to your point, I mean, that kind of gives me a thought, Commissioner Farr, but it's like, I wonder if there's a creative way we can encourage people to come and get licensed, and, you know, basically, these are some of the benefits to you coming and doing this, so that, and I don't know what those mechanisms are, but
Well, once we finish this, it might be, hey, this has been updated to meet state code, we might, you know, put that in the monthly newsletter or something, just something simple, and say, the attached accessory apartments has been updated, you know, the attached apartments have been updated and modified in the state code. Any of you that have not currently meeting code, make sure that you don't have applications, please see the city.
Yeah.
At least then there's a notice.
yeah.
I think the easiest way is just to offer a Chick-fil-A gift card to the neighbor.
We've got a lot of new restaurants coming to town.
Then question is, what do we do about that? Because that's been brought up here before, you know, things are brought up, and how do we enforce it, right? Even when we turn it into the city, what's the city willing to do?
Do my best to be brief. First of all, thank you so much for your efforts in this and getting us out ahead of the game. I know that this topic is coal miner deep because this is the arena I play in daily. The necessity for the ADUs and all of that stuff and everything that the legislature is saying is mostly true, but not all of it true. And so my first concern with this is us getting into spending time and resources to write ordinances for areas and zones and trying to pick the spots that we want to see this appear just to have the state come in and force it like they did the HOA is really, to me, pointless until we know what the state's gonna force it. When you start talking about the ADUs and all of the different rules and nuances that come inside of them, and you start looking at the different cities and county ordinances that are already out there. What we're doing is we're completely changing the market dynamic without acknowledging it. And so what's happening is we're taking all of these single family homes and we're turning them all into multi-tenant homes or multi-tenant units. And we're turning them all into profit centers. And so now from the real estate side, instead of selling a single family home, I'm selling a duplex, but we're not calling it a duplex, we're calling it an ADU. And then you get into all of the additional stuff that the mayor addressed with the cost of our infrastructure. Utilities, none of it was designed for this extra load that we're talking about. And so I have a lot of legitimate concern about spending resources on stuff that's just going to be forced on us. I appreciate the fact that we're doing preemptive stuff to stay in compliance. I like that a lot. Really appreciate that. I don't know what's going to happen next. I know that it's terrifying as far as thinking about whether or not we go on the property line, off the property line, do all of these outbuildings, and we start doing the ADUs inside, and then we've got their permitted duplexes. And then what's going to happen next is the investors are going to start buying. It's not going to be all owner occupied stuff. It might look like owner occupied stuff on paper, but we're building a whole bunch of investment properties as we do this. And we're really not going to have a say if the state's just going to come in and tell an HOA. In my world, an HOA has more authority than the sheriff. They write their own ordinances, they do their own enforcements, they do their special assessments, they'll actually foreclose on people's property for past dues, for HOA fees, they'll foreclose on your property. But for the state to come in and tell an HOA that they don't have the right to their own community to decide if they have a rental property inside, to me, that's terrifying. Because it tells me that we're not gonna have any rights to proceed with anything we desire.
I was going to end the whole conversation with this, but I mean, Dean is absolutely right. And that's what every city's been trying to tell the legislature, and they're not listening. You've seen apartment buildings going up everywhere. We resisted that so far. There is a bill currently, I don't know what it is, but it's proposing 8 units to the acre to be allowed in every zone. That's currently right now a bill. Dave's gonna sell a lot of houses. That's the case.
It's not even a house, that's like a dog.
I'm just telling you. It is a lot of work, and all the cities pushed back. So what did the legislature do? They said, well, you're not gonna get your PNC well done if you don't do it. They're basically blackmailing the cities.
And it's just enforcement by extortion.
They're quick to remind us that we are a political subdivision of them. We exist at their whim, basically.
Right.
What they're saying by saying it. Because we're always pushing back and saying, hey, you don't like it when the feds come. Sorry, I hope I don't fall off my soapbox because I'm standing pretty high. You don't like when the feds come in and give you mandates. We don't like when the state comes in and gives us mandates. So that's okay. Because you're just subdivision, you exist, we allow you to exist. And that's their attitude. There are lots of bills, lots of changes being proposed. It is coming. We will see. There are some cities that have just thrown up their hands and said, why don't you just take over zoning? Well, they threatened to do that, but then they write, we'd have to have a pretty big department if we're doing all the zoning for the entire state. 329 cities. And that's just the cities, not the towns. So they're like, no, we'll just basically force you to do what we want to do. Now, we're trying to get out ahead of it. We're trying to draft that, they've been trying to put apartments. The next thing we're going to present to you, not tonight, but in the very near future, is what we call all along for the last 3 years, but we're working on the missing middle. Governor, thank goodness, came out and talked about this. We're working on some ordinances that are, proposals to bring to you in the city council, which are not going to be popular amongst our citizens. They're not gonna be popular amongst the city council, they're not gonna be popular with you, but they will address what the state's trying to have us do without building high-rise apartment buildings on every single corner of the city. So we're trying to take be proactive, keep the character of Pleasantview, the character. There are places for apartments, I get that, people need to live in apartments. That's the way the youth, that's the way they're doing, but they also don't want to live in apartments till they're my age. Somewhere along the line, they want to move into a house, just like each of us, and then somewhere along the line, bigger house. You know, and then you get my age and you're like, a smaller place doesn't look that bad. I'm not there yet, but.
But not on the fourth.
But, so we're looking at that missing middle and it will be coming again, trying to get out ahead of it. We've been talking about it for almost 3 years now.
Yeah, ever since I
Since you got
started,
here.
yeah.
So,
More than 3 years. I passed my 3-year mark.
likely, really, it'll help that the governor came out and used those exact terms that we've been using. As we've been moving forward and drafting this kind of stuff. So the nature of the city's changing. It's not by our desire, but we're being blackmailed to do it.
Yeah.
And no city can do away with that, with their being zero. They just can't. They pick something they knew the city's going to do. So
So,
I agree with what they're saying, understand what they're saying, but it is a necessary evil.
And then the one thing, we appreciate you sharing that. And I think the part we're pointing out is if we get ahead of it, which is what the city's trying to do, we can actually implement, they may say you need, AAUs, but we can say.
We got 'em.
But we got them, and the homeowner has to live upstairs, and then they can have somebody else. So we can set some regulations, tell them kind of over, but we can control the.
yes, we might as well try to do that. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
I don't think they're gonna say right away. Like this bill, it's
They want the housing.
eight
They're not
units in
gonna-
every single zone we have. It's not gonna pass. But something like this, where you've got to have a zone with 8. I don't know, hopefully not this year, maybe next year. That's a pie in the sky. It's not gonna pass, but everybody goes, "Ugh," and so if we have the ADUs in place and we have them the way we want, I think the initial push out to the city is gonna, you have to allow ADUs. You draft an ordinance, or you're gonna have to do it. So each of the cities be required to submit a report. Yes, we have ADUs. This is what we're doing. I think that's where it'll start. If it ends there, great. If it doesn't, we'll address it when the state goes as far as we want. For now, that's where we're trying to get in. But you're right, it's frustrating to say.
The question I have, I might be thinking ahead of the game and preparing for the future. The one risk with being ahead of the game is sometimes you can overreach or do more than what actually ends up being required to. And that would be unfortunate circumstances to really, have a knee-jerk approach on something. And then when that is out, whoa, we didn't need to do that after all. And now we've got an entire city that's got multiple homes everywhere. And other communities don't have that problem. So,
I think-
so what I'm saying is, I think a real balance, and I'm not saying that you're not, because I know we are proceeding carefully, but I don't think we want it to be a political approach.
Stable.
We're going slow on all 3 of them.
No, we appreciate that.
And-
Years, we got
Hey, if you wanna know
we got
the
some
possible
progress,
for that?
but we're not jumping in full deep.
And I think we appreciate the city and the house, and you guys taking enough interest to kind of express some of those thoughts or directions, so it's good to know what's coming. So we appreciate that.
And I guess I just add to Commissioner Farr's point, and the slide didn't fit it, but I'd be happy to email it out. I mean, the standards that we have to pick from, I would say we chose from more of the less aggressive ones. Really, we still have to move forward with the goals and the strategies, so.
But what I.
But I get what you're saying, it's not to move so far within that strategy that,
Better off to take different segments of the city to implement
Mhm.
this initially. And then if later on you're forced to expand it, you must.
Yeah.
But why did we implement something citywide?
That's why we want to define.
That's what we're doing with missing middle, as the mayor mentioned. I mentioned the tiny homes that, for some time now, we're not gonna allow that everywhere.
Same, we gotta be really careful.
Yeah.
We don't wanna get over.
but it's a very good point, yeah.
I'll give you a small forecast on the state and why they're allowing the ADUs both inside, internal and external, and how I see it's going to play out in the very near future. As they do this, and then they force and organize the cities to acquire the data on who actually has these properties, there's going to be a special tax assessment to compensate for all the additional costs for everybody that has them. And so that's gonna be an extra line item that they're going to see on their tax statement as that gets disclosed. And so I think if we're going to try and collect that data to arm the state with that data so that we're ready for it. Personally, I love the Chick-fil-A thing. I think we're best off if we can make it a simple postcard form on the website that can be filled out for free. We don't charge for it, we just want to know because we want our fire and rescue and police to know. And we do it as a safety feature and it's free, so that people disclose it, we can gather the data and we know that it's accurate. I
Well,
think
and then
that's-
it shows that we're in compliance and we don't keep getting slapped with it.
Correct. I don't think that we should go after it with guns blazing and fangs trying to collect fees and all of that stuff. I think it needs to be simple and fee free,
Well, at least
so that
not
we
yet.
get it. With that,
At least not yet.
that's exactly, because we're not gonna be the ones with fangs, it's gonna be the state. The state's gonna be the one that comes out and says, oh, we're so glad that you helped comply. Now you get to pay for all the subsidized housing with your income that you're getting. That's how it's very,
Very awesome.
not possible.
All right, we usually, whenever we ask you, we normally jump to item 4, which is remarks from commissioner or staff. And this time we would usually ask, our city council, and since you're here tonight, are there any remarks or upcoming events from the city council that we want to look for on the calendar as?
The other thing I wanted to mention, so the city council in January meeting after the elections, which were basically everybody was reelected, so. We redo our assignments this year. The city council chose not to have a city council liaison. And all the city council members are free to come, anybody can come, but we
That's
don't-
so sweet.
we don't have a formal, okay, so, person so basically any of us, I raise my hand, should be treated just like so, and that is one change.
We've appreciated Sarah being here, so we can have that communication to keep us.
Yeah, and we
What's
will find
happening?
other council members
And
too.
if they come, they'll be invited up to the.
Please come. And feel free to raise your hand, participate. So that's one change we made. We talked about actually making it a rotating assignment. I've been a big proponent, I've mentioned this to Julie and Andy, of non-interference. Only come here when there's something that I think I really need to present. I think this is twice in 6 years, or maybe 3 times in 6 years. So I don't come to city council or at the planning commission a lot. I think this commission needs to operate independent without the influence. You're supposed to be giving us recommendations. We're not supposed to be giving you recommendations to give us recommendations back. If that makes sense. So I try to keep our influence to Bill Minor. And so if we get other council members, we might want to remind them that if they if they do, but I don't think there's gonna be a problem. We have a really great city council right now. But I really think, you know, we were, and that was one reason we talked about the changes, to make sure it appears that, you know, that we're not trying to influence. As I talked to other cities and other mayors, some have some, most don't. So liaisons to the not know at the county level, or that we have an adult commissioner for showing up or assigned to. Like, so we want you guys to function as you're supposed to function, give us the recommendations to function first. Yes.
Can I just do a tack on to that, Mayor? Sorry. But there was discussion with the council, and obviously we've enjoyed and valued the connection with Councilmember Yuri, but there's not really a lot of connection with all of the other council members necessarily. I mean, you might know them on a personal basis. And so I think we'd like to schedule an annual dinner get together with the two bodies to meet, to interact, to intermingle, so that you can get to know your elected officials.
And I will make sure, I'm not trying to say Sarah was doing that, I'm just saying that as I talk to everybody else, and I don't believe she's done that. I've never had, nobody's complained to me, nobody's, okay, it's just more of a parent thing than the other council members decided us.
You'll still see me because I've
Yeah.
been to these meetings, because I like to.
We appreciate it, and
Well, no,
you're
if you have
updating what's going
questions, I'm happy to answer or whatever, and I'm also like Ann and I were the last time, if we have comments, we'll share.
Now, I do believe we're down one council
Planning
commission member,
Mhm.
is that correct?
Is it all, or
It'll automatically fall to an alternate.
If any of you have any recommendations, please give them.
And we do have a little bit of a pool, but, and a form that individuals can fill out. So if helpful, I'm happy to send the form out. I know some of you got on from filling out the form and appreciate that. It's just, but I think our pool is kind of dwindled, so we have a few people, but not.
Just if you know.
we might come.
Great.
I can send that tomorrow, make a note.
And then like, Amy, we talked about the year to get together.
Sorry, you were probably gonna address that. I just wanted to make sure. I know I was gonna kind of ask if we wanted to do a Tuesday or I was thinking probably a Thursday on a Saturday, but not the last Saturday. Sorry, Commissioner Gosner.
Sam,
No, but I think, my thought was we've really limited our second Thursday meeting nights, and maybe we do one of those and see if council's available for one of those. If
The
that,
the other thing, you guys are completely free to reach out to us. I prefer that we don't reach out to you and try to influence you, but feel free if you got questions, concerns, whatever, to reach out to me or anyone. That's where the direction is supposed to flow, so.
Thank you.
and if you need any contact information, we do have a roster of our elected officials.
That's all on the website.
And on the website, yes, of course.
Staff, any other communications for tonight? Brandon?
I don't have anything, but I appreciate it.
No, I would just say thank you for the good dialogue tonight. I know these conversations are hard. I know that a lot of this does impact the nature of our community, a lot of things relative to our community. And again, we've got requirements that we want to meet and do our part. And it's just helpful to have an understanding commission that's willing to have the dialogue and interject the feedback and commentary on that. And I wrote down copious notes from the good comments that we did receive. And I think it gives us really good kind of starting place in drafting something and continuing the conversation. It's not going to be an easy button, ordinance coming forward. I think it's something we really want to vet through. And as we continue to progress in that vetting, I mean, we're meeting the state requirements in having these discussions and doing this. And I truly appreciate the dialogue. It's been great.
Thank you. And I really appreciate everybody being here tonight. These are important things. It's at least a quiet month, so we can actually get to these things on the table.
Don't have another quiet month. I'll find more stuff to do.
Any other things? Hearing none, we'll take motion to adjourn for the night.
All the recommendations there. I know probably Jeff and Sean and Dean, probably because of your professional, probably stay up to date on some of the legislative items I talked about. Maybe you could give him the link to the.
The bill tracker, yeah.
Bill tracker link.
Do you want to know the
If you
person
want-
that's proposing the bill that he just mentioned? I'll give you his name and number, and you can call and say, what the freak?
Anyway,
This per acre,
yeah.
I'll tell you.
There's a bill tracker that the probably cities in town tracks and tells stuff, and they get most of these hot, big ones like that.
Mhm.
Give Amy to send it.
It's really helpful.
Especially if you can't sleep at night.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Yeah, then you really can't.
So, all right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
You don't want to sleep.